Imagine standing on a ridge in southern England, the morning mist still clinging to the valley below. It is the 14th of October, 1066. You can hear them before you see them, the steady drum of 10,000 boots, the clank of iron hauberks, the snort of war horses brought forward in the grey half-light. On that ridge stands King Harold Godwinson, the last true Anglo-Saxon king of England. Below the ridge, an army of Normans, Bretons, and mercenaries stretches across the fields. At their head rides a man who has crossed the English Channel on a gamble, William, Duke of Normandy. Before this day is done, one of these men will be dead, and England will never be the same again. In the entire sweep of English history, no single day has shaped the nation more completely than this one. The Battle of Hastings was not just a battle, it was a civilizational collision, two worlds meeting on a Sussex hillside, and only one walking away. To understand what happened on that October morning, you have to understand the crisis that brought it there. England in 1066 was a kingdom under enormous pressure. The old king, Edward the Confessor, had died on the 5th of January with no clear heir. He had spent much of his reign looking toward Normandy, the French duchy where he had grown up in exile, and, according to Norman sources, he had promised the English throne to his cousin William. But deathbed promises and political reality are two very different things. The English nobility, through a council called the Witan, moved fast. Within a single day of Edward's death, they elected Harold Godwinson, the most powerful earl in England, as king. He was crowned the same day. It was efficient, it was decisive, and it was, to William of Normandy, an outright theft.
William was not the kind of man who accepted insult quietly. He was formidable, physically powerful, ruthlessly intelligent, and possessed of an iron conviction that God was on his side. He had ruled Normandy since the age of 7, surviving assassination attempts, rebellions, and betrayals that would have broken a lesser man. Now the English crown, which he believed was rightfully his, had been handed to a man he considered a usurper and an oath-breaker. William began to build an invasion fleet. But Harold had more than one enemy to face. While William assembled his army across the Channel, another claimant was sailing down from Norway. Harold Hardrada, the last great Viking king, arrived on the northeast coast of England with over 300 ships and a fearsome reputation. Harold Godwinson marched his army north at extraordinary speed. On the 25th of September, just 19 days before Hastings, Harold smashed Hardrada's forces at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. Hardrada was killed. The Viking Age in England ended in a single afternoon. It was a stunning victory. Harold had every reason to feel invincible. 2 days later, the wind in the English Channel turned south. William's fleet set sail. Harold received news of the Norman landing while still in the north, celebrating his victory. The pressure he faced was immense. He could rest his exhausted army, wait for William to ravage the countryside and choose the ground himself, or he could move fast, strike hard, and end this before it could grow. Harold chose speed. He rode south, gathering fresh troops as he went, covering nearly 300 miles in less than 2 weeks. Whether this decision was his greatest strength or his fatal error is one of the enduring debates of history.
By the 13th of October, Harold had positioned his army on a ridge above the village of Senlac, not far from the coast. He formed his men into the traditional Anglo-Saxon shield wall, a dense, overlapping line of warriors locked behind round shields, axes, and spears. It was a formation that had held against Viking raids for generations.
Harold's housecarls, his elite professional warriors, formed the iron spine of the line. Behind them, the feared, the local levies, filled out the wings. They numbered somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000 men. They were exhausted, but they held the high ground, and for a time that was enough. At 9 in the morning, the Norman advance began. William sent his archers forward first, launching volley after volley up the slope. The Anglo-Saxon shield wall absorbed them. Then came the infantry, thousands of men charging uphill into a wall of shields and axes. The Normans hit the English line and staggered. Harold's housecarls were devastating at close range. The two-handed Danish axe could cleave through a mounted horse and rider in a single blow. The Norman advance slowed, faltered. On the left flank, the Breton contingent broke entirely and fled back down the hill. A roar went up from the English line. The battle seemed to be turning. But this was only the beginning of William's tactical genius. As the Bretons fled and English warriors on the right broke ranks to pursue them, Norman cavalry wheeled and cut them down in the open field. Whether it was a deliberate feint or a seized opportunity, William recognized the gap and drove through it. The tactic was repeated through the long afternoon, a partial withdrawal, drawing men off the ridge, then a cavalry countercharge that slaughtered them in the open. Slowly, methodically, the English shield wall was bled thin.
The battleground raged on for hours. By mid-afternoon, the ridge still held, but the wall was thinner, bloodier, and spent. Then the arrow volleys changed. William ordered his archers to fire in high arcs, up and over the shields, into the mass of men behind the front line. One of those arrows, or perhaps a Norman lance, found Harold Godwinson. The Bayeux tapestry, stitched within living memory of the battle, shows a man wrenching an arrow from his eye beneath the words, "Harold Rex interfectus est." King Harold is killed. With Harold fallen, the English resistance collapsed. His housecarls fought around his body until the last man was cut down. As the sun set over the Sussex hills, the Norman horsemen swept the field. On Christmas Day, 1066, William, Duke of Normandy, was crowned King of England in Westminster Abbey. He would be called William the Conqueror. The consequences were immediate and seismic. Within 5 years, William had replaced virtually the entire English nobility with Normans. Anglo-Saxon lords were dispossessed, exiled, or reduced to serfs on land their families had held for generations. The English language itself was transformed. French flooded in from above, giving us words like justice, nobility, parliament, and castle, layered over the older Anglo-Saxon roots beneath. The landscape changed too. Norman castles rose across England in stone, a visible, deliberate architecture of control. The Tower of London was begun. The Domesday Book was commissioned, the most comprehensive survey of a medieval kingdom ever attempted, cataloguing every field, every mill, every ox in England, so William knew precisely what he now owned. Here is something that puts the scale of that day into perspective. Of the roughly 8,000 men who stood in Harold's shield wall that morning, scholars estimate fewer than half survived. The Anglo-Saxon ruling class of England was effectively destroyed in a single afternoon. A culture that had produced Beowulf, the Sutton Hoo burial, and the Alfred Jewel was subordinated almost overnight to a French-speaking elite who would dominate England for the next 3 centuries. The Battle of Hastings was not the end of the story. It was the violent beginning of England we know today. The English language, the most widely spoken on Earth, carries the fingerprints of that October afternoon in every sentence. Every time we use a word like crown or court or conquest, we speak in the long shadow of Hastings. William's victory did not merely conquer a kingdom, it forged one. Out of the collision between Norman ambition and Anglo-Saxon tradition came something neither could have built alone, a nation harder, more layered, and ultimately more enduring than either world that met on that ridge. One arrow, one afternoon, 1,000 years of consequence.